Hi, Mr. Robin. How are you?
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you several questions, maybe on a personal note. So is it fine? Okay, so you were talking about success, correct? And I was wondering, so what is your personal drive for success?
Wow. Okay. You know, I think my focus for success is to really contribute to the development of others and to the mission of the company. The personal success tends to follow. So as I would look at hiring new staff, the point with Jill, when we talk about the fact that I could plug a 27-year-old into a CEO position and create an opportunity for them, for me, that was success because it took some vision that I had that I think that I truly am committed to the young professionals stepping up. And so to be able to follow up and again convince partners that it was the right thing to do, for me that's the type of thing that's success. It's usually contributing towards someone else or the firm's goals. For me, that's how I define it.
Okay, that's great. So let's say if it's for students alone, what can you tell them that, like they are fresh grad, so they want a success in the future. So what is their main thing they should always be reminded of?
Well, again, whether you start a business or if you're going to be joining a firm, a company, I think what you really need to focus on is delivering value. And how do you deliver value? You need to understand the company's mission. You need to understand their values. You need to be able to drive that company to greater success. And inside that, usually a firm will have, particularly a CPA firm, is going to have clients. So what you need to focus on is contributing not only to your firm's success, but to the success of your clients. And once you do that, if your focus is there, I think that the personal gains, the recognition, the advancement will all follow. But you can't lead with the idea of how can I be a success. I think what you have to do is really focus on the mission and the success of others around you, and your personal success will follow.
I see. Okay, so this is an interesting question which I would love to ask. Okay, what is the advice you took up during your experience for so many years? What was the advice which made you like, okay, this is my philosophy in life? Yeah.
Yeah, whoa. Can you make it a multiple choice?
No, I do not have one.
You know, I think it comes down to that foundational focus on really trying to achieve greater good for those around you. And I don't know if I can really put that into a philosophy, but you know, when I graduated university, I had put out an application for an auto parts store to be their bookkeeper.
Wow.
I also put one out to a small CPA firm to be a junior auditor. And thank goodness it was the CPA firm that snapped me up and hired me. And you know, I was always so grateful for opportunity that I always felt like I needed to achieve at my highest and best. So I don't know if I could say that it was someone else's philosophy, but I feel like I've had a very charmed career, and I felt like I owed it to my employer, to my family, to work hard, to focus, and really try to use my skills at their highest and best level. And that just seemed to be ingrained very early in my career.
So it's like something you truly like grow into, like as you develop, correct?
Well, I think so, and I think some of that perhaps ties back, not to get too heavy on this, but family values. You know, what have you been taught? You know, what do you owe to your loyalty to your employer, to your family? And I think that drives it. It's a motivation factor that you need to stay focused. You need to really do your best, so that when you're shaving in the morning, for some of us, you can look at yourself in the eye and say, yes, I've done my best. I've really worked my hardest to try to contribute to success. And I think that comes from a lot of pieces in the formation of individuals.
Okay. Okay, that's another way of seeing it. Yeah. So here's another thing. So throughout your experience and everything, obviously we have mistakes coming through our lives. So what was the one mistake that made you think like, yeah, I should take a look back?
Yeah, I've had the good fortune of having a mistake-free career.
Yeah. No.
You know, that's a great question, and you know, I don't know if there was any major debilitating career choice type mistake. I've really only had two positions. One was with that CPA firm that I became managing partner with, and the other now is CEO of HLBI International. But you know, mistakes happen, and I think a couple of things that perhaps I have am blessed with is, number one, I don't obsess over them. They're gone. They're gone very shortly. But what I think is important is, and I can't focus on any single mistake. I mean, I've had mistakes where perhaps I didn't hire the right person. Perhaps I didn't do as good a job in winning a new client opportunity. Perhaps I wasn't quite as prepared. But from each of the mistakes, I think what you just simply need to do is learn from it, put it aside, and keep moving forward. And you know, if your eyes are moving forward, you're not going to obsess with looking back, but there are lessons to be learned with each mistake. And so I think it's that, I've worked with some people who just, they're so hard on themselves. They've made a mistake. And it's something that they simply take with them too long. Let it go. Learn from it. Focus on getting it right the next time and moving forward.
That's great. Wow, so, okay, throughout the entire journey, what was the people that you met which kind of like inspired you, or maybe like people you worked with? Yeah.
You know, again, I think I was blessed with having just outstanding partners, outstanding staff. When I look at someone like this Jill or this Gloria, people that are coming up, you know, part of my goal and focus is to inspire them to achieve at higher levels. But what I found was the inspiration was coming back from them because they were bright, they were motivated, they were dedicated, and they were just fun to work with. So throughout my career, I've simply had a really, really fortunate experience to not only have outstanding partners and staff that I worked with, but some truly extraordinary clients. You know, we think of us being in the teacher role with clients, but let me tell you, it comes back the other way. One of those clients that actually did one of those acquisitions in Swindon, I can remember, and I've taken this with me, he would always say, when his staff were trying to get ahead of themselves, he always said, crawl, walk, run. In other words, there's an order to getting to where you need to be. And if you start to run, you may be running in the wrong direction. But so he was one that influenced me because I always tried to analyze things from taking that first important step and then moving it forward. And I found that execution of ideas, if you take that with you, it certainly is one thing that has paid some dividends for me.
Wow. Now, I guess that each and every one of us should have learned this kind of experience sooner or later. It's great talking to you about all this, and I think we have some questions. We can have some questions on the floor. Do we?
Good evening, Mr. Robert. It's great to actually finally meet you in person. I'm Rina Shalom. I'm currently pursuing my degree in accounting. I have a question about your firm. As you know, today most top public listed companies are audited by the Big Four, And they've actually created like an oligopoly, whereby they've captured almost 70% to 80% of the worldwide audit revenue. But despite that, how is HLB International, as well as all of the member firms, growing strong in the audit industry?
Sure, great question. You know, Big Four are outstanding organizations, and they tend to match up. Certainly like the FTSE 100, I think they do 99 or 100 of them, and it's a good match. HLB member firms, we usually refer to us as being mid-tier, and our firms do fantastic. Our Hong Kong affiliate, for instance, our Hong Kong firm is number 6 in listed companies, so they have a specialization in listed work. But many of our firms across the world have a great concentration with SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, and I almost take exception to the small part of that because I guess technically they're labeled as SMEs, but some of them are very substantial firms. We have privately held clients across HLB that have operations in perhaps 20 and 30 countries, very complex assignments. And so to answer your question, there is plenty of very good work around the world. And the other part that maybe some don't grasp, and I can share you with this from my own CPA firm, is sometimes a company might want the Big Four audit name on it for whatever reason. Perhaps they're looking at an exit strategy, perhaps they feel that it's giving them some type of an advantage. But there's so many other services that those companies need. They need tax planning. They need a variety of consulting. And what I found with HLB member firms, many of them provide services to very substantial listed clients, but perhaps not in the actual audit area. And from one of my experiences, we had an excellent client, and for some reason they wanted the Big Four. They had, I can't remember which one, they had one of the Big Four that actually did the audit. And I'm going to make up numbers now because it's been a few years, but perhaps they were charging them $40,000 a year for the audit. We did the consulting, the tax planning, the cross-border work. We never charged them less than $100,000. So on scale, audit isn't always the driver of revenue. Oftentimes, the higher value services are in other areas. So I find that our HLB member firms do just fine. They match up with the right size clients for audit and certain other services, but they oftentimes reach up on a variety of other services into some very substantial listed companies as well.
Okay, now we have 2 questions coming from INTI Subang campus. Here's a student called Henry Chow. He's a bachelor degree student of Mass Comm. And his first question is this: for those who doubt on venturing into entrepreneurship, how is it better than working a 9-to-5 job?
Whoa. Yeah, 9-to-5ers, man. I got a problem with 9-to-5ers. You know, when you talk about focus for career, I think that truly professionals are driven with getting the job done. And it may happen inside 9-to-5, it may happen outside 9-to-5. So I want to be careful with this question here because I don't think all jobs are necessarily going to be 9-to-5 jobs, because as a professional, you tend to be able to have some flexibility. Remember, one of the attributes they were looking for, HR people, are flexible and adaptable. And that might mean that they're in the CPA industry, there may be a client need that needs to be taken care of after that 5 o'clock punch-out time. But entrepreneurs, you know, if you expand the definition, an entrepreneur might be an individual that starts a business. I understand that, and that's perhaps what we think about most. I think it can be very gratifying, but at the same time, there are some advantages that you simply need to be able to weigh them against each other. If you go into an existing company, you're going to have the opportunity to perhaps work with a team. You're going to have some existing systems that perhaps you can improve, whereas the entrepreneur truly starts at zero. Now, it's a matter of not being right or wrong. It's a matter of what you are driven by. And those that have started businesses, you know, are challenged all the time because there's no one to fall back on oftentimes. They need to do it all themselves at the very beginning, which can be some of the most rewarding. I've had the benefit of stepping into positions. I really didn't start any new firm, but I feel like the entrepreneurial spirit can live inside firms from the individuals that are charged with certain responsibility. You can take that same spirit in your division with your team. You can drive it as though you are an entrepreneur. So 9 to 5, I'd be a little bit cautious of. I've never been a fan of that. I think you really need to be professional in getting the work done for your client. But at the same time, you need to keep an eye on personal and career balance. I think sometimes that gets out of whack. People think that if you go into the accounting industry, certainly in the US, that during the busy time of year, you're going to work 70 and 80 hours a week. And I don't think that works very well or very long term. So, you know, it's an interesting question, and I don't think there's any one clear answer. If you have an opportunity to start a business, I think you ought to follow through with it. At the same time, you can get great rewards in working for an existing company.
Okay.
Hello, sir. I think you are very inspired from Steve Jobs. He said, stay foolish, stay hungry. And how can we apply this perception in financial industry where we have very specially audit, we have very straightforward hardened rules that we need to follow. So there's less, flexibility of taking risk.
Wow, yeah. Well, the stay hungry part, I think, is the easy part, because I think that's always not being satisfied with where you are. When I spoke to that smaller group of students in May, well, one of the lines I used was status quo sucks. And the reason I said that is, if you just always feel satisfied, you're not going to look for that next level. You're not going to ask those key questions, what if, and wouldn't it be great if you're always satisfied. So I think Steve Jobs really had that focus on what's next, and how can you really stay in that mode that's always trying to improve. As far as the foolish part, I suppose that could be read a number of different ways. But, I think that if you go back to that 3M slide, do you know that if you go into their site, one of the parts they talk about is to give employees playtime. Now imagine that, playtime, because they want to create an environment for innovation. So I think that you can't take yourself too seriously and still be able to get and think outside the box. And I think you said it very well. The accounting profession is very much so thought to be inside the box, very stoic, very conservative. But I think you can smash that mode. I think what we need to do is have some of that play time, that time to think just how can we really transform the accounting profession to be more in line with the industries that are moving so fast forward with technology in other areas. So Steve Jobs was a true inspiration for me, and I may have to think about that one a bit more, but those are my initial thoughts is, you can't just stay inside that stoic box. You need to be able to get outside of it, and you always need to be looking for what's next, and that's the hungry part.
Not all companies can afford innovation with taking new strategic actions in view of personal capacity to help them go with changes or adapt innovation in both time-taking and requires good capital. So how do you define smart risk for those companies?
Very, very good question. And I tried to kind of open the discussion on that when I talked about trying to convince partners, because if you're going to invest in such things as paperless systems or new technology, it's going to take that capital, the same thing that you're talking about. So I think the answer here is innovation. Some innovation does have a price tag on it. Clearly, if you're going to add some technology, you likely need to invest in both software and hardware. But there's other innovation that simply is driven by process. And so I would say in the circumstance that was described here, that firm needs to stay within their means. They can't overstretch to the point that they can't make payroll and meet their other needs. But they can look to innovate in other ways with processes, and at the same time they can maybe plan out over a longer period. So it's a matter of timing. So if for instance, if the innovation is to come up with a paperless system, perhaps they can't do it in year one. But perhaps over a 2 or 3 or 4 year period, they can save some portion of profits. They can do some reserves. They can explore possibilities for bank financing. This is kind of business 101. But there's opportunities, I think, if they're well planned out. So it's a great question, because that oftentimes is the inhibitor. That's what holds people back, is they don't have that resource. So I think long-range planning is one of the solutions to this problem.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tautges.